Now, the things that I didn't like about this movie, you guys might love. So bear in mind, as with all films, your mileage may vary with this one. So, A Haunting in Venice made my top 10 most anticipated for 2023. And I'll start off by saying I enjoyed it. I feel like I didn't enjoy it quite as much as the first two. I saw Death on the Nile on the big screen. I did not see Murder on the Orient Express until it came to the small screen. So honestly, I didn't take many notes. The movie takes place in 1947 and it's Venice, Italy, and Poirot, can never say his name. He is kind of removed himself from people. He's basically retired, so he's kind of standoffish about stuff like that. But he comes into contact, or a female mystery writer comes into contact with him. They know each other. Basically, her series of books is based on him. So she's gotten famous by writing mystery novels based on his character. I kind of feel like maybe she was sort of a spin on Agatha Christie herself. Now, this is apparently based on an Agatha Christie story. What's it called? Halloween Night, maybe, or something like that. I'm assuming it was an Agatha Christie, not like a ghostwriter or someone else writing, like maybe after she passed or something. I didn't do a lot of digging into it, but I did find out that yes, it is based on an actual story that had been written. So the one thing that distinguished this for me from the other movies that I've seen is that I went into this not knowing anything about the story, not knowing anything about the characters, not knowing who was going to be revealed to be the baddie. And so I liked that about this film, because when I saw Murder on the Orient Express, I already knew what that story was about. When I saw Death on the Nile, I had not too long before then seen the 1970s something movie, I think it was, so I knew what was going to happen with that. And it was kind of disappointing because when you go in to see a mystery, you like to be surprised. Well, I mean, I do. I like to be surprised. I don't want to go in knowing already what's up. And so, you like that suspense of, and trying to figure out what's happening. So with this one, that was a definite plus for me. I liked that aspect of it. There were also some things about it that was, I guess, you could put it in the pro category. It was very atmospheric. If you like dark and stormy, almost the entire movie. I put that in the pro category, but at the same time, it's also a con for me because the dark and stormy and the thunderstorm and the water and the dark and dreariness and the shadows and the dim light, that got to me after a while. I wasn't so crazy about that. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, like if it's pervasive. I do like the stereotypical dark and stormy, creepy, scary, but not necessarily when it's the entire movie, because after a while, I feel like that darkness just kind of pulls it down to this really depressing state of mind for me. I don't know. It's hard to explain. Yeah, very atmospheric. That can be pro or con. Also, the acting. The acting was great. And it was interesting to see Tina Fey in here playing a kind of a serious, character. I mean, there wasn't really comedy attached to this film. Very teeny tiny slivers of it. She had a few funny, slightly humorous moments, but in general, she was playing a serious character. Everyone in here did, for the most part, a great job. I honestly can't think of any acting that was lacking. I thought everyone did great. The editing was fine, things like that. Sound design and all that. I mean, it was fine. Technically, those things were great. I can't say the same about cinematography. Not that the cinematography was technically bad, because some people might really love the style that happened in this movie. Kenneth Branagh directed this in addition to the first two movies. You would not know that Kenneth Branagh directed this film because the style of it, the tone of it, well, let me back that up and just say the style of it is pretty much completely different from the first two movies. The camera angles, the way the scenes were shot was completely different. I even wrote it down: odd camera angle, and then I wrote down from above, and then I wrote also camera attached to him, and I'll explain what I mean. There were multiple scenes where the camera is positioned above, like way above and looking down at the people. And it wasn't just maybe once or twice, it was all the time. All the time. Well, okay, I take that back. It was interspersed with normal type of shots, but this camera angle from above shot, and also there were almost fishbowl-y shots too. And then there were multiple times where, you know how when it's showing a character walk and the camera's basically attached to them, so it gives this really weird sort of shaky background. I don't know how to explain it, but you know it when you see it. It's like, oh wow, that camera's attached to him. There were multiple instances of these things, and I was not crazy about that. In all honesty, that really got to the point where it agitated me. I did not like it. I felt that it created a distance between myself and the characters. Maybe that was intentional. So I had an interesting talk with Paulie on his channel. I mean, not on his channel, but in the comments, because he did an out of the theater reaction to this, and I was explaining to him how I felt about this camera work, and he was saying that he loved it. He thought it was great. I'm basically going to paraphrase what he was saying, but he felt like it was representative of the main character's distance from the people around him in general, sort of symbolizing where he was at that point in his life, because he had removed himself socially from people, wasn't doing cases anymore and stuff like that. I can see where he's coming from with regard to that. But just on an aesthetic level, for me, I didn't like it. I just didn't. And I was surprised that it got under my skin as much as it did, because I was like, this is removing me from the moment. This is removing me from the characters. This is making me feel like I'm too much of an observer. Maybe that's the way to put it. It made me feel like I was just an observer. Well, technically we're all observers, right? When we're watching a movie. But what I mean is, movies in general can put you in this place where you feel like you're right there. You're not necessarily part of the action, but you're in it. You're in it. Even though technically, yes, you're observing it. But what I'm trying to explain is that in this movie, with the cameras being up like this very often, and the weird fishbowl-y effect, it made me feel even further removed from the story. It made me feel like an outside observer. Like literally like an outside observer. And I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but it was just I think I said to Paulie that it just made this disconnect, or made me feel distant from the characters. And if that was the whole point of it, it worked. But for me, it was not something that was advantageous. I did not like that feeling, and I came away from the movies like, well, I liked it. I liked the story. The reveal at the end was interesting. The characters were fine. The atmospheric, dark, oppressive stuff, that kind of gave me this overall sort of just very doom and gloomy and just blah sort of feeling. But that whole thing with the camera trick, I just felt like it separated me. It just caused this, I don't know, removal of myself from the story, and therefore affected my enjoyment of it. And that's, maybe I'm not making myself clear. Like, maybe if you watch it, you'll see what I mean. And maybe, like I said at the very beginning, you will absolutely love these things that I wasn't crazy about. Everyone's different. But in general, I'm almost curious to read or listen to the story that this is based on, because this movie does take place on Halloween night. And something else that I thought was, look that's part of what I'm talking about. There, the camera looks like it's a little below, but there were so many times it was like above, and the people, anyway, whatever. Something that I thought was interesting about this film too is that, so the trailer makes you think, oh, it's like this horror, it's got this horror vibe, and it does, obviously, because there's murder that's happening, but it's also making you think, oh, ghosts and stuff like that. And something that I enjoyed about the story was that it does string you along, making you wonder about a lot of stuff, even all the way up to the end. That's just something else that added another difference between this movie and the others. I was thinking to myself, if it ends up being X, that's actually going to aggravate me, because I'm really not going to like that at all. And it didn't end up completely being X, but in a way, it sort of did. So that might also be something that is feeding into my feeling of my lack of outright love for this movie. Now, I remember Death on the Nile. I remember that I enjoyed it, but I expressed the sentiment that I wasn't crazy about some of the changes that they made to the characters, but I also remember expressing the disappointment that I already knew what was going on, as I've mentioned earlier in this review. Basically, this does sound like a pretty negative review. I don't want you guys to think that I really do feel 100% negative about it, because I don't. I guess I'm just feeling a skosh unsettled or disappointed that I wasn't presented with what I was expecting to be presented with. Maybe this is a film that I'm going to have to rewatch and just kind of stew on it a little bit more, and perhaps my feeling about it will change. I honestly don't know if they're going to have any more movies with Kenneth Branagh in this role and directing. I mean, I would be fine with continuing to watch them because I do like mystery stories, and these have been, for the most part, pleasant experiences. I've enjoyed them in general, but I'm not sure. This feels almost like a conclusion, honestly. This feels like a trilogy. Now, I have not read up on plans for any continuation, so it might be that I am totally off base, and yes, he will be returning to the role and to the helm directing, but it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. That was just the tone that this movie had, the feeling that I had when it was done. I don't know how much of that is just tied into the fact that it was very dark and dreary and felt gloomy and depressing, and so therefore I'm feeling like, oh, this is the end, or what. I honestly don't know. But yeah, there was a long day yesterday. I went to go see Satanic Hispanics, and then not too long after that one was over, I went ahead and watched this. I didn't get home till really late last night. I'm not the biggest fan of double features, but given my schedule, it just felt like the best thing to do instead of going back out tonight to go watch this. I'm glad I got it under my belt, and I really don't have anything else to say about it, I don't think. I know I've gone on and on and on quite a bit about it, but I only took 4 notes. 1947, odd camera angle, from above, atmospheric, and camera attached to him. So despite all of the words I put into this review, I didn't feel like a whole lot of motivation to take notes. Again, there's that sort of emotional separation from the story that I had. Okay, well, I can't think of anything else, so I'm wrapping this up, and we'll see you guys later. Hasta luego.